Okay, it is Wednesday, August the 21st, 2019, and welcome to week number eight already, of Introduction to Corrections. And I'm Professor Richard Wright, and I'm going to be with you with the next, half hour or so, sharing with you information and details concerning this week's assignments. And then also, since there is no assignment next week, no lecture next week, I'll be talking also about next week. So let's scroll down. As you can see, this is week 8. You have weeks 1, 2, 3, 4 already recordings here. And after today, week 8 will be here. So now let's take a look at the lecture announcement for the week. This week, parole is the topic. And to prepare for this, you read chapter 7, 8, and 9 of the text. I previously sent you the PowerPoints that you should have. And then defining parole is issues, and then concluding with a conversation with a parole officer. So we're going to look at that video. And then participate in the discussion assignment, parole violations, and the officer role. Initial posts were due last night, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. Reply posts due this Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. Finally, complete the written assignments, why parolees fail, and can be done, and what can be done, and then the quiz. I do recommend that the time quiz is taken the end of the week, so that you go through and you get all the details that you need to prepare to be able to score high on the quiz. And then my motto, adversity is the springboard to success. And you already know that for your written assignments, which are due on Sunday, along with the quiz, that the rubrics for the grading for that are found in each weekly assignment. So we're going to go over the course calendar here. Look at the course tools. Okay. Here's the course calendar, which I'll populate in a second. And here we are here on live lecture with your initial post that was due yesterday, your reading assignment that was given for Monday, and then your reply post, which is due on Saturday the 24th. Your written assignment, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, and then your quiz that I've already talked about. And then next week, then you have a repeat of that. Now notice, after this week, there is going to be one more lecture. And the lecture that will take place won't be until September 4th, 2 days after Labor Day. And then be aware of the fact that the course ends the 13th, Friday the 13th. And that's when the course absolutely ends, not Sunday the 15th, but it will be September the 13th. And all assignments that are not submitted in will not be accepted. And you should be aware of the fact that at this point, it's difficult for you to make up assignments for weeks 1 through 5, because we are now in the second part of the course, starting with week 6. So I am in the process of grading papers. I'm just a little behind, but I will have your assignments all completed in time, so don't worry about that. Any questions about it, feel free to reach out to me. Okay, so now let's go and let's look at the actual module. So first, let's look at the assignments, why parolees fail, and what can be done. And so you're going to do research as to what makes parolees fail in a 2-page paper, double-spaced, citations and references, cover page, Roman 12. In this 2-page paper, you're going to explain 2 to 3 top reasons what can be done to assist parolees to be successful. And then here is your rubric. You click on the assignment itself, and it opens up. You'll see your due date, and then your possible 25 points. And then when it says View Rubric, hover over it, click on it, and it opens up. You can research why parolees fail in the community. Same thing I just told you a few minutes ago. In paragraph form, double space, citations in the body, references in the end, not just a citation, but throughout the body of the paper. And then, of course, your citations and your references, a reference, properly formatted reference page. And then that's it. Make sure you don't use Wikipedia. I don't think anyone has used it in this course at all, because you will lose points right away. And that's your written assignment for this week. Then your discussion posts. You, again, are familiar with that. And then finally, your quiz. Your quiz, which again is timed. 10 multiple choice questions. And it is due Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Okay, so let's go back. And so any questions you have regarding any of these assignments, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll provide you with details and answers. All right, I'm going to defer going into the week 9 assignment. The one I'm going to talk about in week 9, though, is the course project, which will be due. So today we're going to talk about parole, define what parole is, and then we're going to have a conversation with a parole officer as the video. Okay. So what exactly is parole? As you know, that when a person goes to jail and or not go to jail and they're released before their sentence is completed, that's called probation. And probation can come about when a person doesn't go into jail. Notice I'm using the term jail. Probation goes with jail. It does not go with prison. When a person is sentenced to a period of incarceration, a year or over, they will then be headed to prison. When they serve a certain period of time, which varies according to jurisdictions, the individual then is allowed to complete the rest of their sentence in the community or living on the outside. And that individual then is subjected to certain rules and regulations that are given, or conditions, such as staying away from felons, not committing, of course, any criminal acts, not getting high on drugs or alcohol, particularly drugs, and finding yourself in a situation where you have to report to the parole officer, keep in contact with your parole officer about where you live, where you work, where you go to school. The bottom line is that even though you will not be incarcerated, you will then be free in the community, but you must abide by the conditions that are established by the parole board that is set out. Now, many jurisdictions now, or some, are doing away with the term parole, such as Illinois, and using what we call mandatory supervised release. But it's really the same essence, same thing that works the same way. It's just that they don't use the term parole. And so individuals placed back in the community, they are still on what we call paper, which means they're under the control and jurisdiction of the state or the jurisdiction until the sentence is expired. So, and individuals can be returned to prison for violating their parole and finish the rest of their sentence in prison. So parole operates on the basis of what we call discretionary or indeterminate sentencing or mandatory determinate sentence. Now, in each of these situations, the individual is released based upon a certain period of time. So indeterminate sentencing pretty much means where a person might serve a good portion of their time and be released, but the board will then make the decision. But in some jurisdictions, there is based upon a sentence, a certain period of time that that person must be incarcerated before they even qualify for parole, and that's mandatory or under determinate sentencing. Okay, a parole board determines when the discretionary period is granted, and as I said, is subject to revocation if you don't abide by the rules. Same as parole, it is a privilege. You don't have a right to parole as you didn't have a right to probation. And before you do violate a parole violation, a petition will be brought forth, and then you will have a right to what we call due process. That is to face the accused. In other words, to fight it, provide your side of the story, and it will be decided by a neutral party. And so you'll be able to provide evidence as to why you should return to parole, and you can be represented by an attorney or yourself, and you have the right to cross-examine any witnesses that may be against you. And the determination of whether or not you violated parole is brought in writing so that you'll have an opportunity to respond. You respond before parole is revoked. Now, it is not the desire of most parole boards or officers to have your parole revoked, because the idea is to keep you out. However, it depends on the type of offense that may cause your violation as to whether or not you will return. Certainly committing another criminal act is one way, and certainly another thing is not following the conditions of the parole. So under the release for parole, you are assigned to what we refer to as a PO, or a parole officer, and they will monitor, determine that you're doing all the things, then satisfying all the conditions and obeying the rules and the law. And the key idea is to have that parole officer to help you with what we call reintegration. That is to reintegrate into the community so that you can find your way back into the community and become a productive citizen. So therefore, parolees are subject to sometimes intensive supervision where they have a GPS on them as well, because then depending on the type of individual it is, well, they want to monitor the individual and make sure the individual is keeping the conditions that were set out and that they're not doing anything to violate it. And they might have other types of surveillance. And so the other thing that the parole officer does is help parolees with education, with employment, to help them deal with some life skills, of some training or something. They might connect them with organizations or institutions that can help them to get back into the community. If they have a drug problem, to probably, as part of the parole, be a condition that they subject themselves to regular attendance in some program like AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, or Drugs Anonymous, or some kind of program to help them deal with the issues that may have gotten them in trouble in the first place, such as drugs. As I've referred commonly, that drugs seems to be a very popular thing that equates with crime in itself. And also, the parole officer might help the person to deal with, in terms of jobs, a lot of jurisdictions now and places to work together with the parole officer and the parolee have established what we call second chance programs, where individuals are able to, of course, get hired and work, because one of the barriers that parolees face for a long time, and some still do now, is the fact that they have a conviction. And remember, when you're on parole, your conviction is still in place, and so your background is subject to be checked, and so therefore there is a need for organizations or companies or agencies that will hire individuals knowing that they are felons, and to give them a chance to make an honest living and to stay out of trouble and to satisfy the conditions that are set forth in with their parole. In addition, family issues to help you get placed with family. It is quite clear that generally individuals who are placed with family, unless you're in a situation where you have a family that the family is known for crime, then that's different. But the idea is to help you to get settled back into the community as much as practically possible, so that you will again recognize the errors of your ways and go in a more positive direction in life. Now, sometimes individuals find themselves in situations where they don't satisfy the requirements, or they fail to satisfy the issues or satisfy the conditions of their parole. And so individuals find themselves, as it says here, with the same risk, need, and responsibility as applied to parolees that apply to probationers. So so parole, though, becomes more beneficial to individuals as they follow the rules. Remember, I said the role of the parole officer is to help you, but also the parole officer can turn into a prosecutor if you do violate the terms of the parole. And paroles are akin to counselors anyway. They're there to guide you and direct you in your new life, as I previously stated. And so in place for personal conditions such as housing, counseling, employment, or job training, social networking, finding yourself in a situation where you're not able to get help as far as any of these issues. And then social networking is so critical. Remember, you are generally given as part of the conditions of parole to stay away from individuals who commit criminal acts. And so the idea is to put you in a different light. Now, one of the most famous paroles is also one of the most famous cases in American jurisprudence in terms of criminal is the O.J. Simpson case. As everybody knows, it was broadcast back in 94, 95 area, and that a couple years ago, a year or so ago, when O.J. Simpson was released from prison not for the offense that he was tried for originally, but for a subsequent offense when he tried to get back some of his property from someone in a botched robbery or some invasion, and he was incarcerated. And when he served his time out, his parole was broadcast on television. His parole was very different, though, than a lot of paroles. For example, in most paroles, there is usually a prosecutor, and then there's a defense attorney, and then there's a parole board. And then there will be witnesses who come forth who testify as to why or why not you should be granted parole. And that's generally how it operates. Well, in the O.J. Simpson case, if you saw the parole hearing, you will recognize the fact that it was different in that some of the victims, at least one in fact, came and testified that he felt that O.J. Simpson had adequately made amends, had apologized, had demonstrated remorse, and put that together with the fact that he was in support of O.J.'s release, which, like I said, generally you don't have the victims coming forth saying that in most instances. And usually you'll have people from the family or close friends coming to testify about that, or some of the parole officers, some of the jail, or rather prison officials who've had contact with an inmate. But in the O.J. Simpson case, as I said, there was nobody to prosecute. Nobody was there to oppose his parole, and everybody spoke in a positive light, saying that he should be granted parole. And as you know, the parole board set the conditions out for Mr. Simpson, and then released him on parole. And the testimony of one of the victims, as well as the prison officials, stating that he had been a model prisoner, that he tried to help other prisoners in a positive way to turn their lives around, and so consequently parole was granted. And so now parole, as I said with him, as whatever the amount of time that he still had to serve, he can then serve it, or you could serve as a parolee outside the facility and then begin to matriculate and move your life in a direction where you move closer to getting back to normal. And that's how parole operates. It is a good program, and as I said again, continues even if the name changed, but the idea of how it works will continue. And so I want to take the time to present to you a video and of how parole officers work, and of some offenders, And this is a parole law interview with a parole officer, and you can hear some of the issues. Be able to hear the recording itself. So let me also at the same time turn off my video. Stop that. So there we go. And so it's about a 15-minute video, so we're going to get started with this.
My name is Lance Culver with the Minnesota Department of Corrections. I started with the Department of Corrections in 1995. I started as a probation officer, working with adult misdemeanors and juvenile and all other misdemeanor felons, whatnot. Did that position for many years before becoming a supervisor release probation officer, working mainly with adults, solely with adults. Did that for many years before I took the current position that I'm working in now and to the supervisor release and CIP, the Challenge Incarceration Program.
And both programs are the equivalent of parole. These people have been to prison and are serving the remainder of their prison sentence in the community.
That is correct. All the clients that I've worked with have been sentenced to prison, served their immediate time in prison, have been released on their remaining third of supervision in the community. However, on the CIP program, or Challenge Incarceration Boot Camp program, those individuals are released early as inmates still living in the community working on their prison sentence.
Okay. Okay. So what does that mean, that you get everybody who comes out of prison?
When an individual is sentenced in the court system to prison, those individuals that go to prison are evaluated at the institution, determining their risk to public. If their risk score reaches a certain level, they are assigned to an intensive supervised release team. I am a part of that team that supervised some of the more risky cases in the state of Minnesota. Those would be cases of murder, possibly all sex offenders that are a significant risk to public safety, and level 3 sex offenders, level 2 sex offenders, but not necessarily all sex offenders are considered a risk to public safety. I'm also a CIP agent. CIP stands for Challenge Incarceration Program. We handle the individuals that come out of the Minnesota version of boot camp. And so we have a boot camp system for early releasees who have met the criteria for early release.
But they have gone to prison in order to participate in this boot camp.
That's correct. I am a supervised release agent now. My primary, I work mainly and only with individuals who are released from prisons.
Okay, what are the qualifications to do your position?
The qualifications to be what's called a corrections agent are a 4-year degree in corrections or an equivalent background such as sociology, psychology, also an internship of 400 hours or equivalent work such as including precinct investigations, case management. You might look at other types of employment such as case manager within the institution and other case management type jobs within the community and other social work type jobs in the state.
Is there a typical day for you?
Yes. Some days are very typical. You wake up, you get dressed, you check your vehicle, because all of our contact, all of our work is in the community. We operate out of, as an intensive supervised release agent, we work out of the car. The car is set up like an office. It has a laptop. It looks like a lot like a squad car. We review the previous days or from the last time we worked current notes that were inputted on all clients. I have sometimes, a lot of times, a to-do list that never seems to go away and just gets longer and longer each day. Review that and then basically start setting up a contact list of the people I'm going to see for that day. Then load up my car, check my vehicle before I leave, and then head out onto the road.
So once you're on the road, are visits typical home, because you're at their home, correct?
In their homes, workplaces, and any place that they talk to an agent about frequently. Could be a community service site, could be a support group meeting.
Okay. So what might happen at a visit?
In a typical home contact, an agent will head into the residence, do a brief walk through the residence to make sure that everything is status quo. There's nothing out of the ordinary going on. Once that has been established, we start to work on basically the housekeeping things. What conditions have you met to this point? The standard conditions, a lot of our people have to do community service, treatment, things like that. We discuss those housekeeping things. And then we start looking at case management, looking at things that the clients are interested in, looking at some of their high-risk needs and areas, and start addressing some of those needs and start planning for the future in hopes of addressing some of the problems they've had in the past in order to prevent those from being problems in the future.
Okay, so are there ever like violation issues or safety issues for you?
Absolutely. Every day is a safety issue, not only for us within the home of our clients, their peers and associates within the home, but also for us, and for a lot of people, might be people from the immediate surroundings of the community. I happen to spend a lot of time in North Minneapolis, which I think a lot of people are aware of. There is an area for violence. So you always have to have situational awareness in regards to what's going on around you. We are trained in agent safety training courses in order to prevent or to reduce the incidence of to reduce the incidence of safety issues with agents, not putting yourself in a position where a client has you locked in, de-escalation skills in terms of if something's going south, if something's starting to look bad, you're able to work that through in a manner that de-escalates the problem down to hopefully little or nothing.
Okay. We've talked about release of offenders and some of the barriers and issues that they face. Do you see that with the population you work with?
Yes. These individuals have gone to prison with not much care to their lives. They don't have 401k plans. They don't have retirement plans. They haven't had, some of them never even worked a job for any length of time whatsoever. And so when they're released, those are tremendous obstacles that need to be overcome. Within the institution, there are programs developed for those things that are doing skills, job training programs within the institution. So some of that is had within the institution. The biggest problem is housing. They burned a lot of bridges going into the institution. And so bridges being family, they burned up their family members, they burned up their friends. And so when they're released, they have nothing. No one. And a lot of times they'll come up here from another state and commit a crime. And so really, they're stuck. They have nowhere to go, nothing to do. So housing is a big issue. Employment is a big issue, but that's for everybody.
Okay, and so you work with them on those issues. You help with those issues also?
I do. Not necessarily directly with the clients in regards to their individual housing needs, but we are always in search of offender housing in the areas that we supervise. That is one of our mission statements. That's one of our goals as agents is to find suitable housing for clients that we can use on a regular basis. For those individuals who don't otherwise have housing within the community, there are a lot of programs out there, especially in the metro area, that are willing to help us.
Okay. Touched on violations earlier, but we've talked about the violation process, and it's a little bit different than going to court. Can you talk about the hearing process and maybe your role as an agent during that process?
An agent plays a dual role in that process. Although an agent's in the home working with the client to assist them in their facilitation of a better life, when it comes to a violation, in a hearing, an agent becomes a prosecutor. and in that the hearing is set up typically at jails. So let's start from the beginning. If an agent comes into a situation and the client is not in a violation situation, an ISR agent does carry handcuffs, and at that point makes the determination as to whether or not they're going to place that person in custody. They can do it themselves, or they can call for backup from local law enforcement, which is always advised. In most situations, as ISR, I tend to work the situation myself because that's not been too much of a problem for me so far. But anyway, when the violation occurs, the client is placed in custody. A warrant is issued for their arrest through the officer of the day. That is placed in I typically transport the client to the local jail. At that point, we establish a report based on that violation and any other violation that may be out there. That report is submitted to Minnesota, the Department of Corrections Hearings and Release Unit and the State Public Defender's Office. A hearing is scheduled, and those three parties come together: the client, the hearings and release officer, and the public defender. The agent is also there and acts as the prosecutor or the prosecutor. They present the evidence to show that the client has violated their conditions of release. The defense attorney, of course, defends the client, and then the hearing officer weighs the decision to determine whether or not there has been a preponderance of evidence showing that the client has violated their conditions of release, and if they have, whether or not the violation is sufficient enough to send them back to the institution, restructure them, or dismiss. Which means addressing that there was a violation, finding that there is a suitable cause to put either accountability in place or to put other aspects in place, such as a client using drugs may be considered for a evaluation and possible for a treatment program to assist them in that behavior.
So sometimes intermediate sanctions can be used instead of reincarceration.
Intermediate sanctions are agents will have at their disposal in the field, and what they'll do is it acts like a revocation within the institution, but without the hearing officers. The agent will client if they're willing to participate in this program, and at that point the client may be willing to engage in those things that we talked about in our restructure, such as their chemical dependency programming, an intermediate sanction that would be a loss of privileges, may even voluntarily go on to an electronic monitor to address accountability issues.
Okay. And you mentioned a hearing officer. Is that like a parole board in other states?
It would be like, I think a parole board would be set up more in a factor of having multiple individuals at a table evaluating a person's adjustment to be released from the institution. I think it's more like a judge.
Okay.
In this particular case, I would equate it more to the judge's role. They weigh both sides of the evidence. The defense attorney lays out their side of the story. The client lays out his information, and then the probation officer, parole officer, ISR agent lays out their violation. The hearing officer / what should be judge takes all that information in and determines whether or not that person is in violation or not.
Okay.
Then sanction is a resolution comes after that from that hearing officer / judge.
Okay.
It's an administrative position.
Okay.
It's called an administrative hearing.
Okay. Do you have advice for students today who are interested in this field?
This is, as everybody knows, the community, the state is suffering significant losses in revenue, and jobs are hard to find in any field. Advice for people who are coming in the field is volunteer. Get into the agencies, do pre-sentence investigations, do case management, work with kids, get to know people in the field. Once you're in the field, have a good idea of what it is that you want to do in the field, and be an innovator. I think 20 years from now, it might not look the same way it did 20 years ago. So I suspect what we're going to be looking at is technology, how they can bring that to the forefront, those individuals feel can be an asset to that agency, not necessarily somebody who wants to sit behind the desk all day or who wants to just collect a paycheck to do a job that they can and collect a paycheck to do the job to do what they want to do elsewhere. It's those who really love the job and really bring something to that agency that are really going to make a difference in how we see corrections in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. As you listen to several things, number one, you discovered one of the things at the top, education-wise, you cannot become a parole officer without a 4-year degree. Therefore, those who are seeking to stop at associates, you're not going to become a parole officer because it is a 4-year degree. And one of the reasons why it's like that is because the parole officer, as I said earlier, is akin to a social worker and helps to guide the parolee and put them on the right track. And as I said, utilizes the various resources there. The other thing that you noted that was covered at the end is that it's not a desk job. It's not like a 9-to-5 job. Matter of fact, I've met parole officers and they addressed the ones I've seen here in my jurisdiction in Will County and in Cook County are dressed in gear like police officers. They almost look like SWAT team members, and they have the bulletproof vest, and then they have the weapons and all of those things. So they're out there to try to keep the parolee in line, and they will go and visit the parolee on not just jobs, but in school, or see how things are going and making sure that the parolee is satisfying the requirements there. Notice, too, that he talked about, and this should apply to anything in criminal justice or in any field, but particularly in criminal justice, is that because the economy being tight and that the budgets of many jurisdictions in terms of hiring individuals tight, you want to get a foot in the door. And one of the things that we encourage people is to, as he said, volunteer, agree to do internships. And even if the internships don't have to do with a grade, but what we call externships, where they're outside the school and have nothing to do with the school, but it's something that will introduce you to individuals. And then also in courses like this, for example, I encourage people who are interested in parole to do their course project on a parole officer and the agency, and make themselves known to those individuals. And I did say at the outset that when you were doing those interviews, present yourself as if you're going to be hired for one of those positions, so you put your professional foot forward. Notice communication is so important as well. He also mentioned, in terms of all of our transferable skills, but he mentioned technology. In dealing with that, we shared and each course here in our syllabus as a transferable skill, digital fluency, being able to navigate the system utilizing all kinds of technology, because now the field, as he said, 20 years ago, or even when I came out of law school, parole officers didn't operate the same way. That was in 1978, 41 years ago, and even 20 years ago, in 1998 and 99, you found that parole officers were doing different. But as technology comes along, so too does the job performing as a parole officer. So what I'm saying is we're preparing you in this school to relate and understand technology itself. So being a parole officer is a rewarding position. It is a challenging position, and you know, like I said again, it's something that many individuals can get into if they work hard enough to want to get into it. And so that's what I wanted to share with you. Now, before we adjourn, since we'll lecture next week, I want to go through next week's assignment, specifically the assignment that relates to not the mental illness assignment, because that's self-explanatory. It's a 2-page paper. But I want to focus on, not this is discussion, but I do want to focus on week 9. Now, week 9, your final paper is due for the course project that we started talking about in week 1, that you completed an assignment in week 2. You completed another assignment in week 4, and then most recently, last week, you completed an assignment in week 7, that the interview. Now, what I recommended to people at the beginning is that you take the information from each of those weeks and you have them prepared and set up a subtopic or category for, don't say week 2, week 4, week 7, say what is, and then right under it what the information is that you use to do the assignment. And then the next thing you could do then for week 4 is demonstrate your research by providing information concerning the website or the information covered from research, not just the website. There are students who says, oh, I couldn't just find on the website. You could find similar information about agencies and also by making some phone calls. So that information that you completed for week 4 should be included in the paper and have a subtopic. And then finally, week 7, you should have the interview, a separate section for the interview. And remember that you should have citations in the paper. And if you remember in the interview in week 7, you did have to have citations for the statements to the questions. And remember where those questions came from. They came from week 1 under the Lessons tab, and that you also had to add some questions yourself as well. And so those should be in depth. So now that brings us to the final part. In this final project, it says include the agency background, interview information you previously gathered, and make sure that you have followed with the feedback that I have given to you in each of those assignments in terms of making sure that you do present this in your final project correctly. Then it says incorporate research as well to add to what you already have done, finding solutions to some challenges that you might have touched on briefly in the interview, but we want to go more in detail. There should be a minimum of 3 scholarly sources included in the requirements for this week in addition, and should focus on the challenges and the solutions that you discovered during the course of your previous portions of the assignment. And the reason for that is we want you to really understand how to deal with these issues. And you conclude your paper with the recommendations based on the information and how you can, how the system can effectively manage these challenges. So you're going to do that. And so research is very, very, very important, and you will be applying what we call one of our transferable skills, that of communication, that being written communication in completion of this project. And so, and critical thinking as well, because you're going to present ideas and information. And again, support them with citations and references. But I can't tell you three challenges or rather 3 scholarly sources. They should come from like magazines or either law journals or any sources that you can find concerning the area, whether it's probation that you wrote about, parole, whether it's jails, prison, one of those 4. And so you'll submit that with, of course, a reference page. And then it reminds you that if you want to review the requirements, Module 1, Course Project, Introduction to Project and Field Visit, which we went over extensively in the Week 1 assignment. And so you have a cover page, double-spaced, and make sure that you follow this. So I'm recommending that everybody pay close attention to this information, and I'm going to post an announcement to tell students that the Week 8 lecture contains details about how to produce a paper that could get you all of the points. I believe it's 100 points, so it's a big portion of your grade. And that's what I wanted to tell you about that. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to adjourn, and then I will see you in 2 weeks in September, the Wednesday after Labor Day, which I believe is the 4th, and we will be having our very last lecture. I think it is the 4th. It is the 4th at the same time. So with that, I'm going to say good night to each of you.